The abandoned father. The battlefield was silent now. Smoke rose from the ruins, and broken ships lay scattered across the land. The war between humans and the Karek had finally ended, but at what cost? The colony was destroyed, the people either dead or gone. Only a few survivors remained, lost and desperate. Captain Daniel Carter stood in the middle of the wreckage, holding a small bundle in his arms. A baby, his baby. Her tiny hands curled around his finger, her skin soft and warm. She had his brown eyes, but something else, something alien. Small blue markings ran down her cheeks, glowing faintly in the dim light. She was not fully human. She was half Koran, half of the alien race that had once been their allies. And now she was all he had left. But her mother was gone. Valara had left. No note, no message, no goodbye. Just disappeared like a ghost in the night. One moment she was there, staring at the child with sorrow in her golden eyes, and the next she was gone, vanished into the dark. Daniel had searched for her, calling her name, running through the burning streets. But there was no sign of her. She abandoned them. His hands trembled as he pulled the baby closer. He didn't know how to raise a child. He was a soldier, a fighter. His life was war, not parenthood. But as the baby made a soft sound, her small body pressed against his chest, something inside him changed. He would not abandon her. Even if Valara had left, even if she had betrayed them, he would not do the same. Days turned into weeks. Daniel did his best. He scavenged what he could from the remains of the colony. He found shelter in an old outpost, hidden from the world. He hunted for food, carried his daughter on his back, and fought to keep her safe. He named her Mira Carter. She was small, fragile, but she had strength. She rarely cried, and when she looked at him, her eyes held something deep, something wise, as if she understood the weight of their world. At night, Daniel sat beside her crib, staring at the stars. He thought about Valara, about the love they once had, about the promises she made. He asked himself the same question every night. Why did she leave? Was she forced to go, or did she choose to walk away? No matter the answer, the pain was the same. 3 months passed. Life was hard, but they survived. Mira grew fast, too fast. By the time she was 6 months old, she was already walking, already speaking small words. Not just in English, but in Koran, her mother's language. Daniel didn't know what to do. Was this normal for half-Koran children? Or was she something more? Then the messages started. At first, they were small things, scratches on the walls, symbols written in Koran script. Warnings. They are watching. Then, one night, a shadow moved outside the outpost. Daniel grabbed his rifle and stepped outside, his heart pounding. The wind howled through the empty streets, and the moon cast long shadows. He saw nothing, but he felt it. Someone was watching them. He held Mira close that night, his mind racing. Had the Karek come back? Were they looking for survivors? Or was it something else? Something connected to Valara? Daniel clenched his jaw. Whatever it was, he wouldn't let them take his daughter. No matter what. A father's struggle. The outpost was quiet. Too quiet. Daniel Carter had spent years in war, and he knew the feeling that came before danger. It was the way the air felt heavier, the way the silence stretched too long, the way even the wind seemed to hold its breath. He tightened his grip on the knife in his hand. His rifle lay nearby, but he didn't reach for it yet. Noise could get them killed. He listened. Nothing. Just the crackling of the fire and the soft breathing of his daughter. Mira slept peacefully in a small crib made from salvaged metal and cloth. The glow from the fire cast shadows on her tiny face, highlighting the faint blue markings on her skin, the core inside of her heritage. Daniel still wasn't used to them. Every time he looked at her, he was reminded of Valara and the unanswered questions she left behind. He exhaled slowly, forcing his body to relax. Maybe it was just paranoia. Maybe the weeks of survival, the constant tension, were getting to him. Maybe. A sound. Soft. Barely there. But Daniel heard it. A whisper of movement outside the outpost. His heartbeat quickened, but his hand stayed steady. He had trained for situations like this. War had sharpened his instincts. He moved silently, staying low, grabbing his rifle as he crept toward the entrance. A shadow flickered past the window. Someone was out there. He raised his rifle, finger resting on the trigger. His mind raced with possibilities. Raiders, survivors, Koran scouts, or worse, the Karek. He waited. The door was reinforced, but not invincible. If someone wanted in, they would find a way. Minutes passed. The shadow did not return. Still, Daniel did not lower his weapon. The next morning, by dawn, there was no sign of intruders. Daniel searched the perimeter but found nothing. No tracks, no footprints, no evidence that someone had been there. But he knew what he had heard. Something was watching them, and that meant danger. He glanced back at the outpost, at the small window where Mira's curious eyes peeked out. She had woken up early, as she always did, waiting for him. She was only 6 months old, but she already understood more than she should. Maybe it was the Koran blood in her, or maybe it was just Mira herself. He forced a smile and walked inside. She giggled as he picked her up, wrapping her tiny hands around his finger. "Morning, sunshine," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. She babbled something in response, half in English, half in Koran. The language barrier between them was growing. She was learning words he didn't understand, words Villara would have taught her. It made his chest tighten. Mira didn't know her mother. She didn't even know what she had lost. Daniel pushed the thought away. He couldn't think about Villara now. Not when their survival was on the line. Survival and secrets. Life in the outpost was harsh. Food was scarce, and supplies were running low. Daniel had to hunt every few days, leaving Mira in a safe corner of the bunker while he searched for food. It wasn't ideal, but there was no choice. Each time he left, his heart clenched with fear. What if something happened while he was gone? What if the shadow returned? He trained himself to be fast, to kill quickly and return before anything could go wrong. But it was never enough. Mira was growing fast, faster than any human child should. At 7 months, she was walking. At 8 months, she was speaking in full sentences, some in English, some in Koran. Daniel could barely keep up. And then there were her eyes. Sometimes, when she looked at him, her pupils would shift, changing from round human irises to sharp slits, like a Koran's. It only lasted a second, but it sent chills down his spine. What was happening to her? Was this normal for half-Koran children? Or was Mira something else entirely? The first attack. The answer came on a cold night, 1 month later. Daniel had just put Mira to bed when the alarms went off. Red lights flashed across the outpost. A mechanical voice crackled through the speakers, one of the old security systems still active. "Intruder detected. Intruder detected." Daniel grabbed his rifle and rushed to the door. His heart pounded as he checked the cameras. Nothing. Just darkness. Then, movement. Something was out there. A figure, barely visible, standing just beyond the range of the lights. Daniel's blood ran cold. It was a Koran, not Villara. Someone else. And they were looking straight at the camera. A chill crawled down his spine. For months, he had wondered if Villara would come back. Now he realized something else. It wasn't just Villara who knew about Mira. Others did too. And they were coming for her. The truth begins to surface. The Koran outside the outpost didn't move. Daniel watched through the grainy security feed, rifle gripped tight, breath slow and steady. The figure stood just beyond the perimeter, bathed in the faint glow of the emergency lights. Tall, cloaked, unmoving. Whoever they were, They weren't here by accident. They had come for Mira. Daniel's mind raced. He had prepared for something like this, but preparation didn't make it easier. He had enough ammunition to defend the outpost, enough traps to slow down an enemy. But he had one weakness. Mira. If he fought, he risked her life. If he ran, he had nowhere to go. His finger hovered over the trigger, but something made him pause. The Koran raised a hand, a slow, deliberate motion. Then, a voice, filtered through the external speakers. Human, I know you are inside. I mean no harm. Daniel didn't respond. He had heard that lie before. The Koran continued. You are protecting something that does not belong to you. Daniel's grip tightened. His blood boiled. Mira was his, not theirs. Never theirs. He took a deep breath and clicked the speaker button. She belongs to no one. Leave now, or I'll make you. The Koran was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, they lowered their hood. Daniel's stomach twisted. The alien had golden eyes. Velara's eyes. But it wasn't her. The Koran was older, with deep scars along their cheekbones and dark tattoos on their forehead. Their robes were lined with silver, a symbol of rank. They weren't just a soldier. They were someone important, someone who knew about Mira. And that meant trouble. The message. The Koran's voice was calm, too calm. You do not understand what you are protecting. Daniel stayed silent. The child is not meant to be yours. His finger twitched on the trigger. She's my daughter. A long pause. Then, the Koran did something unexpected. They kneeled. Daniel frowned. A trick. A distraction. She is more than your daughter, the Koran said. She is a key. The word sent a chill through Daniel's spine. He had spent 3 years keeping Mira hidden. 3 years watching her grow, change, become something different. He had seen the way her eyes shifted from human to Koran. The way she moved faster than any child should. The way she understood things she had never been taught. But he had ignored the truth, because the truth meant danger. And now, the danger had come knocking. What do you want from her? Daniel demanded. The Koran hesitated. Then they pressed something into the ground. A small device. A soft hum filled the air. And suddenly, a hologram appeared. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. It was Velara. Her image flickered, her face weary, her golden eyes filled with regret. Daniel, if you are seeing this, it means they found you. His chest tightened. I never wanted to leave, her voice continued. But I had to. If I stayed, they would have taken Mira the moment she was born. Asterisk, asterisk. Daniel clenched his jaw. Lies. She is not just a child. She is something ancient, something the Karak have been searching for. And if you do not let her go, they will come for you. The message ended. Silence. The Koran watched him carefully. Daniel's mind was a storm. He wanted to be angry. He wanted to throw the device, to scream at the sky, to curse Velara for leaving him with nothing but riddles and half-truths. But most of all, he wanted answers. And he wanted to protect Mira, no matter what. A difficult choice. Inside the outpost, Mira was awake. She stood by the door, watching him, her golden eyes glowing softly in the dim light. She had heard everything. Daniel knelt beside her, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Don't worry, sunshine. No one's taking you from me. Mira tilted her head. The Koran knows things. About me. Daniel's chest ached. She was smart, too smart. She understood the danger. I don't care what they say, he told her. You're my daughter. That's all that matters. Mira studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. But Daniel saw something in her eyes. Doubt. Fear. Maybe even understanding. She knew something he didn't. And that terrified him. The storm approaches. Outside, the Koran waited. Daniel had a choice. He could run. Take Mira and disappear. Keep hiding. Keep surviving. He could fight. Kill the Koran, send a message that Mira was not to be taken. Or he could listen and risk finding out a truth he might not be ready for. His gut told him the Koran wasn't alone. There were others, waiting in the shadows, watching. Villara's message was a warning, but was it also a plea? Daniel's jaw tightened. He would not lose Mira. Not to the Koran. Not to the Karek. Not to anyone. But the storm was coming. And this time, he wasn't sure if he could stop it. The return of Villara. The wind howled outside the outpost, rattling the rusted metal walls. The night was thick with shadows, but Daniel Carter didn't move. He stood at the entrance, rifle aimed at the kneeling Koran outside. The alien had not attacked, had not threatened. Instead, they had brought a message from Villara. Daniel's grip on his weapon tightened. His heart pounded in his chest, but his face remained still. Years of war had trained him to hide his emotions, to stay cold under pressure. But now, that armor was cracking. Villara was alive. She had left him, left their daughter, left without a word. And yet here she was, her voice, her face, flickering in a hologram, telling him that everything he believed was a lie. That Mira was more than just a child, that she was the key to something ancient, and that something was coming for her. Daniel exhaled slowly, forcing his voice to stay even. Tell me everything. The kneeling Koran, who had yet to give their name, bowed their head. I will. But not here. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Why? The Koran's voice was calm, but urgent, because she is already on her way. She. Daniel's blood ran cold. Villara was coming, and he didn't know if that was a good thing or a disaster waiting to happen. The waiting game. The hours stretched on. Mira sat on a small bed in the corner of the outpost, watching the flickering lights on the security monitors. She wasn't scared, not like most children would be. Instead, she seemed expectant, like she knew this moment was inevitable. Daniel sat beside her, his fingers running absent-mindedly through her dark hair. Do you remember her? He asked softly. Mira blinked. No. A part of him wished she did. A part of him was relieved she didn't. She left us, he said, more to himself than to her, and now she's coming back. Mira tilted her head. Will you let her? Daniel sighed. I don't know, because he didn't trust Villara. Not anymore. The storm breaks. It happened just before dawn. The air grew thick with static. The wind stilled. The outpost's motion sensors beeped in warning. Daniel was already on his feet, rifle in hand, as the front door's security system locked into place. A ship was landing. Not a warship. Not an invasion force. A single, sleek vessel, a Koran stealth-class transport, hovering just above the cracked ground. Mira didn't move from her bed. Daniel stepped forward, his heart hammering in his chest. Stay here. Mira's eyes followed him as he walked toward the door. She's not coming to fight. Daniel froze. Mira had said it so simply, so certainly, as if she knew. Slowly, he reached for the controls and unlocked the door. The wind rushed in as the ship's engines powered down. The ramp lowered, and there she was. Villara. After 3 years, she looked almost unchanged, tall and graceful, her deep blue skin glowing under the rising sun. Her golden eyes locked onto his the moment she stepped forward, filled with something unreadable. She was wearing a long, flowing cloak, lined with the same silver markings as the Koran outside. She looked like a queen, or a fugitive. Daniel's throat tightened. You have a lot of nerve coming back here. Villara's eyes softened. I had no choice. You always had a choice. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Villara's gaze flickered past him, to the small figure standing in the doorway. Mira. Her breath caught. Daniel saw the raw emotion flash across her face, a crack in the careful mask she wore. She. She is beautiful. Mira didn't speak. She only stared, her golden eyes unreadable. Valera took a step forward, but Daniel blocked her path. You don't get to walk in and act like a mother now, he said coldly. You left her. You left us. Valera lowered her gaze. I know. Daniel clenched his fists. Then give me one damn reason why I shouldn't put a bullet in you right now. The truth revealed. Valera looked up, her expression turning grave. Because if you do, she will have no one left to protect her. Daniel's jaw clenched. Protect her from what? Valera glanced at the Corin standing behind her, then back at him. The Carrick knows she exists. They are coming. And if we don't leave now, they will kill everyone in this colony just to get to her. Daniel's blood ran cold. He had been expecting this, dreading it. But hearing it from Valera made it real. Mira's small voice cut through the silence. What do they want from me? Valera turned toward her. Not just you. What is inside you? Daniel's pulse quickened. What are you talking about? Valera hesitated. Then she stepped forward, pulling something from within her cloak. A small silver device. She knelt in front of Mira and gently held it up. The moment it came close to her, the markings on Mira's skin glowed brighter. A low hum filled the air. The device floated from Valera's hand and hovered just above Mira's palm. Mira didn't look surprised. Daniel did. What the hell is that? He demanded. Valera rose slowly. Proof. Proof of what? She met his gaze. That our daughter is the last of an ancient line. The Corin once called them starborn. And the Carrick believe she is the key to their greatest weapon. Daniel felt the world shift beneath him. Valera wasn't just saying Mira was special. She was saying Mira was the reason for a war. And if the Carrick got to her first, they would use her to burn entire worlds. The choice. Daniel looked down at Mira. She was still staring at the floating device, as if she understood something he didn't. His daughter wasn't just his. She was something far bigger, far more dangerous. Valera reached for his hand. Please, Daniel, you don't have to forgive me, but you have to trust me. If we don't leave now, she won't survive what's coming. Daniel swallowed hard. He had spent 3 years protecting Mira from the past. Now the future had caught up to them, and he had to decide. Stay, fight, risk losing her forever, or leave and step into a war he never wanted to be a part of. He looked at his daughter. Mira met his gaze. We should go. Daniel exhaled. The choice was made. They were leaving. But he knew one thing for sure. The Carrick would not stop hunting them, and sooner or later he would have to make them pay. The hidden truth. The stars stretched endlessly above them, cold and indifferent. Daniel Carter sat in the co-pilot's chair, staring out the viewport of Valera's sleek Corin ship as it sliced through space. Everything had happened so fast. One moment, he had been standing in his outpost, ready to kill Valera for abandoning them. The next, he was sitting beside her in a stolen Corin vessel, leaving behind the only home he and Mira had ever known. Mira sat between them, small and quiet, her golden eyes reflecting the starlight. She hadn't asked questions. She hadn't cried. She had simply accepted it, and that terrified Daniel more than anything. What had Valera done to their daughter? What had she known all along? His fists clenched. He wanted answers, and he wanted them now. He turned to Valera. Start talking. Valera didn't look at him. Her hands remained steady on the controls. About what? Daniel gritted his teeth. Don't play games with me. The Carrick. Mira. The Starborn. I want the truth. Valera exhaled, her golden eyes dark with something unreadable. Are you sure you're ready for it? I didn't come all this way for more riddles. Valera nodded slowly. Then she reached into the folds of her robe and pulled out a small metal cube. It hummed softly, pulsing with energy. Mira sat up straighter, I've seen that before. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? Mira reached out, and the cube reacted. It rose from Valara's palm, floating gently in the air before settling into Mira's hands. The moment she touched it, the markings on her skin glowed brighter, as if responding to something ancient and long forgotten. Daniel's stomach twisted. What the hell is happening? Valara's voice was calm, but grave. This is a relic of the Starborn, and Mira is the last of them. The legacy of the Starborn. Daniel had heard many stories about the Koran people over the years, stories of their deep connection to the stars, their advanced technology, their secrets. But he had never heard of the Starborn. Explain. Valara's hands tightened around the control panel. Long before the war between humans and the Karek, there was another war. A silent war, fought in the shadows of history. The Koran were not always the rulers of their empire. Before them, there were others. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Others. Valara nodded. The Starborn. They were more than just Koran. They were something beyond our kind. A rare mutation in our species. They possessed abilities no others had. Abilities that the Karek feared. Daniel glanced at Mira. She was still holding the floating cube, watching it with quiet fascination. Abilities. The way she had grown faster than human children. The way her eyes changed. The way she knew things she shouldn't. Mira is one of them, he said slowly. Valara nodded. The last one. Daniel exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Mira was already being hunted. Now, he knew why. The Karek didn't just want her. They wanted to use her. The Karek's true plan. Valara continued, her voice barely above a whisper. The Karek believe the Starborn are the key to a lost technology. A weapon that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. Daniel's eyes darkened. What kind of weapon? Valara hesitated. A world breaker. A cold silence filled the cockpit. Daniel leaned forward. You're telling me Mira could be used to wipe out entire planets? Valara's gaze was steady. If the Karek get to her first, yes. Daniel felt sick. Mira, his little girl, wasn't just in danger. She was the danger. Mira's awakening. Mira suddenly gasped. The cube in her hands pulsed, sending a shockwave of energy through the cockpit. Lights flickered. The ship shuddered. Daniel jumped up. What the hell? Mira's body trembled as the markings on her skin shifted, glowing brighter than ever before. She looked at Daniel, eyes wide. I see them, she whispered. Daniel's blood ran cold. See what? Mira turned her gaze to the stars beyond the viewport. The Karek fleet. They're coming. The chase begins. Alarms blared through the ship. Valara cursed, slamming her hands against the controls. She's right. They must have tracked us. Daniel grabbed his rifle, instinct kicking in. How much time do we have? Valara's jaw tightened. Minutes. Daniel spun toward Mira. How do you know they're coming? Mira's voice was distant. Because I can hear them. Daniel's stomach twisted. His daughter wasn't just being hunted. She was connected to the enemy. The impossible escape. The ship shook as a blast of energy struck its shields. The viewport lit up with flashes of red. Karek warships dropping out of hyperspace, surrounding them. Valara cursed. They're trying to disable us, not destroy us. They want Mira alive. Daniel's mind raced. Can we outrun them? Valara shook her head. Not unless. Boom. Another hit. Sparks flew across the cockpit. Mira's eyes glowed. The cube in her hands pulsed faster. She turned to Daniel. I can stop them. Daniel's breath caught. How? Mira slowly stood, her small hands curling into fists. The energy radiating from her made the air vibrate. Valara's eyes widened. No. Mira, you're not ready. But Mira had already made up her mind. She pressed her hands to the floor. And then, the entire ship pulsed with raw energy. A new power awakens. Outside, the Karek warships froze. Engines stalled. Lights flickered. Weapons powered down. A shockwave of pure force rippled through space, knocking the fleet off balance. Inside the cockpit, Daniel felt the air grow heavy, charged with something unseen. Mira's eyes were glowing like twin suns. And for the first time, Daniel saw what the Karek truly feared. Not a weapon, not a machine, but his daughter, the last of the Starborn. And she had just declared war. The final battle. The Karek warships hung motionless in the void, their engines dead, their weapons silent. Mira stood in the center of the cockpit, her small hands still glowing, her golden eyes locked onto the frozen fleet. Daniel Carter had seen war. He had fought battles in the trenches, survived orbital bombardments, and faced death more times than he could count. But he had never seen anything like this. His daughter had stopped an entire fleet, with nothing but her mind. The ship's interior hummed with energy, thick and electric, like the air before a thunderstorm. Daniel could feel it in his bones, pressing against his skin. Valera was staring at Mira, wide-eyed, her breath shallow. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "She's still a child." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Tell that to them." He motioned toward the viewport, where the Karek warships remained lifeless, drifting like dead husks in the cold void. Mira finally blinked, and just like that, the energy in the room dissipated. The lights flickered, the pressure eased, and everything returned to eerie silence. She swayed on her feet. Daniel caught her before she collapsed. "Sunshine, are you okay?" Mira's small fingers gripped his sleeve weakly. I can hear them," she murmured. "They're scared." Daniel exchanged a look with Valera. Scared? The Karek were one of the most ruthless war species in the galaxy. They burned entire colonies, enslaved worlds, and never backed down from a fight. Yet his daughter, his 6-year-old daughter, had brought them to their knees without firing a single shot. And now, they were afraid of her. "Mira," he said carefully, "what do you mean, you can hear them?" Mira hesitated, her glowing eyes flickering as if she were listening to something no one else could hear. "They think I'm something else. Something ancient, something their ancestors warned them about." Daniel's stomach twisted. Valera turned back to the viewport, her expression grim. "This battle isn't over. The Karek's last stand." Outside, the Karek fleet was stirring. Their engines reignited, systems rebooting. The warships trembled like beasts waking from a nightmare. And then one of the lead ships sent a transmission. The voice was deep, guttural, and filled with barely contained rage. "Starborn child, we are not finished." Mira's fingers dug into Daniel's sleeve. "They're going to try again." Daniel gritted his teeth. "Like hell they are." Valera's hands flew across the controls. "We need an escape route. Mira bought us time, but we can't fight an entire fleet." Daniel's gaze stayed locked on the warships. He could feel it in his gut. The Karek weren't running. They were preparing for something bigger. Something worse. "They're calling for reinforcements," Mira whispered. Daniel cursed. "How many?" Mira's face was pale. "All of them." Valera's hands froze over the controls. "No, that's impossible." Mira shook her head. "It's not. They know I'm here. They're bringing everything they have." Daniel's grip on his rifle tightened. They had no way out. Unless... His gaze flickered to the frozen warships. A dangerous idea formed in his mind. "What if we don't run?" Asterisk, asterisk. Valera frowned. "What are you saying?" Daniel stood. "We board one of their ships." Valera stared at him like he had lost his mind. "That's suicide. Not if they're still afraid." Daniel turned to Mira. "You stopped them once. Can you do it again?" Mira hesitated. I don't know." Daniel knelt beside her. "I'll be right there with you. You're not alone, sunshine. But if we stay here, they'll just keep coming. We need to hit them first. Valera's hands curled into fists. I can't believe I'm saying this, but he's right. She turned to the controls and rerouted power. I'll get us in close. But if we do this, there's no turning back. Daniel glanced at Mira. Are you ready? Mira looked up at him, her glowing eyes filled with something far older than a child's innocence. Yes. The infiltration. The Koran ship swooped toward the Karek warship, gliding past its weakened defenses. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic thud. Daniel was the first to move. He slung his rifle over his shoulder, checking the charge. We go in fast, take control of their systems, and find out what the hell they're planning. Valara nodded, her pulse gun in hand. We only have minutes before reinforcements arrive. Mira took a deep breath. I can stop them again if I need to. Daniel hesitated, his fatherly instincts warring with the soldier in him. He didn't want Mira to fight. Didn't want her to use whatever power was inside her. But they had no choice. The airlock hissed open. They stepped inside. The heart of the enemy. The corridors were dark and pulsing with a sickly red light. Karek warriors lay collapsed against the walls, their bodies frozen in place, Mira's power still clinging to them like invisible chains. Daniel's heart pounded. She had done this. They moved quickly through the ship, stepping over fallen warriors. Valara led them to the command center. The doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a single Karek standing in the center. Not just any Karek. A warlord. Massive. Covered in dark armor, his body crackling with energy, eyes burning with fury. He wasn't affected by Mira's power. He had resisted, and he was waiting for them. Starborn child, he growled, stepping forward. You are not ready for what you are. Mira trembled, gripping Daniel's arm. The warlord raised a clawed hand. But I will make you ready. The room exploded with fire and chaos. The last stand. Daniel dove, shielding Mira as the warlord unleashed a blast of energy. Valara fired, but the shots barely phased him. This wasn't just another enemy. This was a monster. Daniel gritted his teeth. Mira, do you still hear them? Mira gasped. Yes, the other Karek. They don't want this fight. They're afraid of what he's doing. Daniel's mind clicked. Then make them hear you. Mira closed her eyes. The markings on her skin flared with golden light. The warlord staggered. No, you cannot. Mira's voice rang through the ship, through the comms, through the minds of every Karek in the fleet. Stop fighting. Stop this war. Silence. Then, the Karek ships stopped firing. The warlord screamed in rage as his own kind turned against him. And Mira, his daughter, stood tall, not as a weapon, not as a tool, but as something more. A leader. A starborn. And the war was over. A father's last gift. The battlefield was silent. For the first time in history, the Karek fleet had stopped fighting. No more war cries, no more energy blasts lighting up the void. No more desperate screams. Mira Carter stood at the center of it all, glowing like a star in the dark. Her golden eyes flickered, her small frame trembling as she exhaled. It's over. The Karek warlord lay on the cold floor of his own command deck, his once mighty presence reduced to nothing. His armor was cracked, his weapons useless. The same warriors who had once followed him without question now stood in uneasy silence, looking to Mira, not as an enemy, not as a weapon, but as something else. Something greater. Daniel Carter knew war. He knew battles never ended this way. And yet, here they were. Mira had stopped a war not with firepower, not with violence, but with her mind, with her presence. She had changed them, and Daniel wasn't sure if that scared him or made him prouder than he'd ever been. The aftermath. The Koran ship remained docked against the enemy vessel, its engines humming softly. Valara stood at the control panel, scanning the flickering readings. The Karek are leaving, she said in disbelief. They're actually pulling back. Daniel holstered his rifle, still feeling the adrenaline burning in his veins. Yeah, because they're afraid. Villara shook her head. No, because they're listening. Daniel turned back to Mira, who was still staring at the warlord's fallen body. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't angry. She was just tired. Daniel crouched beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. You did good, Sunshine. Mira looked up at him. Then why do I feel empty? Daniel exhaled. How was he supposed to explain it to her? How did you tell a child that victory never felt like a win? That stopping a war never erased the cost of it. Instead, he just pulled her close. Because you care. And that's what makes you better than them. Mira rested her head against his chest. Villara watched them quietly, something unreadable in her golden eyes. Daniel. He looked up. Villara hesitated. Then, finally, she said the words she had been holding back since she arrived. I was wrong to leave. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Villara stepped forward, her gaze flickering to Mira. I thought I was protecting her. I thought I was protecting you. But I was a coward. Mira glanced up. Then why did you come back? Villara knelt, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I realized something. She looked at Daniel. She didn't just need protection. She needed her father. The words hit Daniel harder than any battle ever had. For years, he had lived with the belief that Villara had abandoned them because she didn't care, that she had chosen to leave them behind. But now, he wasn't so sure. The decision. The Carrack fleet was retreating. The battle was done. The war, at least this part of it, was over. But Daniel knew it wasn't the end. Mira was still the last starborn. The Carrack had backed down today, but there would always be more. Other enemies, other threats, people who wanted to use her, to control her, to destroy her. And now she wasn't just his daughter. She was a leader. She had spoken, and an entire fleet had obeyed. Daniel turned to Villara. What happens now? Villara didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at Mira. She has to choose. Daniel's got twisted. Choose. Villara nodded. To run, or to lead. Mira blinked. I don't understand. Villara placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. We can hide, Mira. Live quietly. Disappear into the stars, and never look back. No more war. No more danger. Mira's gaze flickered. Daniel already knew there was a but coming. Villara's voice was soft but firm. Or, you can embrace what you are. You can stand with the Koran. Teach them. Guide them. Be the starborn they believe you are. Daniel's chest tightened. No. He had fought too hard to keep Mira safe, to keep her his. She was a child. His child. How could she be expected to lead an entire race? He shook his head. She doesn't have to do anything. She's just a kid. Villara's expression was sad. She's never been just a kid. Mira's voice was small. Dad? Daniel looked down. She was watching him, waiting. She wasn't scared. She wasn't confused. She was ready. And he hated it, because it meant he had to let go. A father's last gift. Daniel took a slow breath. He reached into his jacket and pulled out something small, something worn. An old rusted dog tag. His. The one he had carried through every battle, every war. The one he had held on to when he thought he would never make it home. He crouched down and pressed it into Mira's hand. No matter what you choose, this is yours. Mira frowned. What does it mean? Daniel smiled, ruffling her dark hair. It means you're my kid. No matter what happens, no matter where you go, you'll always be my daughter. Mira squeezed the tag in her small fist. Daniel could see the weight of the decision in her eyes. She had already made up her mind. And he had already lost her. Not in the way he feared. Not to the Carrack, or war, or death. But to something bigger. To destiny. Mira stepped forward and took Valara's hand. She turned back to Daniel. I don't want to leave you. Daniel swallowed hard. You're not leaving me, sunshine. He placed a hand on her chest, over her heart. I'll always be right here. Mira's golden eyes shimmered. Valara's lips trembled as she whispered, Daniel. Daniel turned away before she could see the pain in his face. Go. And just like that, it was over. Epilogue. A lone soldier. Daniel Carter watched from the bridge of his ship as Valara's vessel disappeared into the void, carrying Mira away from him. He told himself he had done the right thing, that she would be safe, that she had chosen the path she was meant to walk. But his hands trembled. He had won the war, but he had lost his daughter. The stars stretched endlessly before him, and Daniel Carter, warrior, survivor, father, was finally alone.